Hello and welcome to the Studio at Home Roundtable on cloud solutions, migration, automation and legacy infrastructure in association with Telstra Purple. My name is Mark Chillingworth and it's my pleasure to be hosting today's roundtable debate with some really interesting business technology leaders from organisations such as Telstra Purple, Waverton Investment Management, Allen & Overy and Motor Oil. Thank you for joining us. My guests today are Ian Sheen of Telstra, Nick Ganakis of Motor Oil, Madusa Al-Haq of Waverton Investment Management and John Donovan, CTO at Allen & Overy. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us for today's debate. My first question is, how are you reinventing your businesses to make use of the cloud? Madusa, can I start with you on that one?
Sure. Well, firstly, thanks for having me today. So Waverton have effectively leveraged the pandemic over the last 2020 calendar cycle as an opportunity to really review the opportunities within the cloud. Now, prior to the pandemic, we were always planning our cloud migration to some degree, and as we all can appreciate, the level of fast-paced requirements that our organizations required during the pandemic needed a rethink of our IT strategy quite rapidly. From my perspective, it was very much an urgency to present to the board, the Waverton board that is, the overall IT strategy and actually put forward the review far more quicker. The strategy was very much presented in May 2020, and the view was to really enhance Waverton's overall digital workplace strategy and also commence the cloud migration, which included over 45 servers on premises into the cloud. And the provider that we chose was Microsoft Azure, given the nature of our business being a Microsoft house. And it was very much an opportunity for us to leverage the pandemic and actually begin and commence the migration. So for me, 2020 was very much heavily focused on what I would call the technology transformation program, which we commenced, and much of it has been completed. And I've been fortunate to have had a Microsoft case study as a result of it, which is fantastic. But I would say that the pandemic has very much fast-tracked my strategy, and it was very much executed during 2020.
Wonderful. Ian, it's a story I hear a lot in my travels around the industry. Have you seen that acceleration in the last 12 months as a result of what we've all been through?
Yeah, 2020 has been the year where a lot of IT teams got recognised for the right reasons within organisations. I think previously, if you talked cloud strategy, digital transformation, it would have been viewed as an opportunity, but also a high cost. And in 2020, it was viewed as a necessity. The snowball began with remote access, working from home computing, which actually just opened the floodgates to IT being allowed to do what it wanted to do. So what we're now seeing is, 2020 was a launch year. And a lot of organisations are now starting to think about how we can actually structure the next 4 years. One of the key things from my angle was always a lot of companies had a 2020 objective to reach cloud. And I think 2020 was the year that actually those objectives really started to happen.
Yeah. And Nick, the oil industry has to have a high level of legacy technology. It's an entrenched business. How are you inventing your organisation using new technologies like the cloud?
I was quite blessed because when I joined here, I joined from a large-scale organization as British American Tobacco, where cloud first was the only strategy. So I was spoiled in this manner. Coming around here, the challenge, of course, was to continue this one in a situation where we have a couple of pandemics for us. The COVID-19, and at the same time, the oil price war. In order to do this thing, what we had to accelerate our cloud transformation, and we have done this thing. On the other hand, please be aware that in this specific industry, there is a strong need for edge computing. So we had to balance in between how to transform something which is pure cloud, build, reduce our technical debt and put around here, but at the same time, not lose functionality and continue investing in our edge technologies. terms, for the first time, we put a multi-cloud strategy around here because we are belonging to the critical infrastructure of the country. So for us, it is essential to have a risk-reduced approach also on the cloud side of things. And I'm quite happy because our board, our management board, has been very gratefully accepted our proposal. And we are one of the lucky ones that we didn't reduce our CapEx spending all through 2020.
And John, Alan Overy, you're quite similar to Mattis's role in terms of it's a very professional services, information-centric organisation. Did you too see an acceleration last year of cloud adoption?
I suppose my story is a little bit like Nick's. It's nuanced in terms of what it means to go to the cloud. Now that primarily that's because we are the caretakers of our data and also other people's data as well. So we have to be a little wary of exactly which services we put into the cloud. But essentially, and one of the reasons for that is around data localization, data jurisdiction, and it's a similar story as Nick's in terms of edge computing. So edge computing in this respect is really about how you would deploy different infrastructure in order to respect local jurisdictions or particular constraints on how you use and manage data. But essentially, it's enabled a much faster discussion, especially when I'd say at the start of the pandemic, we made 5 years of decisions in 5 minutes, right? We had to just get a bunch of stuff had to work, or else within 48 hours, you were going to really struggle to operate. So I think that made it much easier to have these conversations and has allowed us to accelerate some of those plans. Yeah.
As one of you all nodded there when John said about making 5 years of decisions in 5 minutes. When you went through that condensed 5-year plan, how did you prioritize things like dealing with the legacy, data analytics, migration plans? What do you pick first in those scenarios?
I mean, in the first instance, it's really the core operations of the business. So it was making sure people had access to laptops that could connect through the VPN, making sure we could scale up and continue to work and effectively allow all of our partners and the staff within the business to be able to operate effectively in the new environment. And then very quickly comes the collaboration that you need, because obviously just giving people a laptop doesn't actually help them work with their colleagues. So that has been one of the most interesting journeys over the last year. How do you continue to improve the way in which people can work together? And in a lot of respects, the cloud technologies are the mechanisms people use. So obviously WebEx or Teams or Zoom or all of these technologies, and we have to have some element of all of them, because it's obviously we are talking to clients who have their preferences on the technologies they want to use. So we've been helping our clients go on this journey with us as well, because the way in which we collaborate with them is also a key part of how we have to work as a professional services organization. So there's a number of challenges we had to overcome fairly quickly.
I have to say that I was quite thrilled about the level of adoption by organization. Started from the pure manufacturing, one of the most complex refineries in Europe that you have around there. So they happily accept to move data centers, to move in the cloud, to move data centers that are supporting truck loading in the cloud as well. I'm talking about applications now that they need to work 24/7 and with reaction in about seconds as well. Things like a spillover can go to the sea. And so I think it was the maturity of our leadership team around here that made our life easier. I want to use an example, which is something that we have done last month. It was the first time in this so traditional organization that even the election of our executive board, the highest body in this organization, happened through Microsoft platform. So even the voting was with Microsoft Forms. That's incredible for this part of the world.
Yeah. Ian, again, that's a story I heard as well of how actually senior leadership teams had to go on to some pretty big journeys. What did you see in them sort of suddenly understanding the sort of prioritisation that Nick, Madison and John have to go through?
Yeah, I mean, my view on 2020 was it was transformation to survive for organisations, right? I mean, it was about staying afloat. It was about being able to operate. It wasn't transformation in how we were talking about transformation in the years before. Transformation was about reinventing yourself, becoming something new. Last year was about staying afloat and being able to operate remotely. So in terms of executives, it depends on how mature you were as an organisation before March, what was it, 17th or 18th last year, when everybody went home. If you weren't used to a chat culture, if you weren't used to communicating remotely, it was a huge challenge. And a lot of organisations stepping away from the technology had to go through a huge cultural shift. Nobody knew how to run meetings. You almost over communicated in the first sort of month because everybody assumed you had to talk all the time, you had to be seen all the time. Execs couldn't quite get their head around the fact that you weren't sat around a table exchanging pieces of paper. I mean, imagine the sheer number of PowerPoint presentations that haven't actually gone through people's hands. So, I mean, the whole sort of cultural shift was gigantic. I think from a technologist perspective, the people who were working on technology, it was less so. That was more about finding a way to communicate unofficially. We're all used to communicating in meetings. It's that conversation away from the meeting that has taken people time to get their heads around, and getting that social communication via Teams and via telephone calls, and even, dare I say, people taking strolls in the park, having conversations, which is a security topic for later.
Madison, you mentioned how you had to change the strategy and accelerate the strategy. How did you go through your prioritizations in that development?
Yeah, just like Nick and John, I think it's fair to say the prioritization has to be based on the business areas that you foresee are key to the operations. And when migrating to the cloud, it's absolutely important to evaluate your ecosystem. And one of the key approaches we took was very much to split our systems from core and development. So core being the operation of the business and the development being the second phase. So we broke it into two phases. The core was very much the priority to ensure that our users could effectively work from home. And I think as part of the core, we also removed the concept of bring your own device. We went entirely Microsoft services for every staff member, slightly on the premium side, but at the end of the day, it provides us the level of security from also the Windows Hello perspective, because one of the key drivers, which I think Ian touched on, security was a key driver behind the device selection as well. So to ensure that we provided a device that was securely allowing our staff to remotely connect to the offices or services in the cloud was a key driver. So I think Surface deployment was one big push, and again from home, which was quite an enjoying experience, along with all the Microsoft technologies, leveraging Windows 10 and leveraging Microsoft 365. I think it's fair to say Teams has been a blessing. Fortunately, we were in a very good position as well prior to the pandemic, which was scarily 12 months ago from almost 23rd. And actually for us to push Teams out and use it as a collaboration tool was probably as part of phase one, because it's the end user experience as well as the back end. And we ran various total cost of ownership tools on the infrastructure to also foresee what the cost would be in the cloud. So I think it was very important for us to really evaluate. And again, fortunate to be in a position where much of that commenced prior to the actual pandemic, but it was very much fast-tracked in terms of approval and then execution.
And you mentioned the importance of security there. Looking ahead to the rest of this year, what do you want to see the vendors do to make sure that organisations like yours are utterly secure?
I think it's fair to say that given the new hybrid way of working, many organisations are taking this as an opportunity to reevaluate their office spaces, and Waveton have also taken that view. We actually had a survey done back in 2019, which was also part of 2020's plan to introduce flexible working. So with flexible working now being, I would say, the norm potentially when we go back to normal, where staff would have the option to work from home, whereas previously it was more or less based on request. security, without a doubt, is probably the biggest factor for our teams, and ensuring that our estates are secure remotely. The reality is that when staff were in the offices, the security policies worked effectively because you were in the perimeter of your demise and your infrastructure. But ensuring that you've got the data leakage policies working effectively from home, ensuring that staff can't access the websites that they shouldn't be accessing, also ensuring that the monitoring layers of your internal security infrastructure tools are pushed out to your remote workers is as important. So without a doubt, it's been an interesting challenge, and without a doubt, it's going to continue with this new hybrid way of working. So from my perspective, it's important that the vendors evaluate and introduce solutions that work effectively in silos for these devices. Whereas at the moment, you're very much routing back into the office to capture the logs or alerts. Whereas now you're pretty much, I think, as we mentioned, is internet first, right? So we need solutions that are internet based only.
Interesting point. John, what's the position for you? What would you like to see the vendors do to improve security?
I think, to take a slightly different angle on that question, I suppose I'd like to see more maturity in how data is managed. So that includes the point I made earlier around jurisdiction, but actually it's understanding that, I guess, the subtleties in how this needs to be managed in different situations, and how long data is kept, making it very clear how and where data is stored. When you you can see that one of the things you have to manage or fully understand is when you drop data into the cloud, well, where does it go, and who has access to it, and what sort of situations do you need to be aware of where that data might be exposed. So, and that's not necessarily about security, that's about understanding how that data will be managed and looking at the life cycle, how that data needs to be curated over time. And I think that still feels that there's a lot of work to do there to make that into a mature model that reflects the sort of concerns that people have around why they want to move data onto the cloud or why they may not want to. And I think as you see that maturity, a lot of these discussions are really about data. They're not. There's I guess, advantages in using many of the services that are really only available in the cloud, but many of the concerns that come with the data that's and the way that's been managed. So as you start to see that maturing and looking at cloud interconnects and brokerage services, then that allows you to move data into the cloud and move it out of the cloud and be able to have much more control over that. And possibly, as you look at the sort of services that are being provided by the key vendors like Outpost or Azure Stack, those things then become also much more mature in reflecting the needs of most enterprises, which are becoming increasingly more complicated as you look at the sort of scenarios we see around the globe, and how people are nervous about who has access to their information.
And does that data maturity need to be both from the vendor but also internally within organizations?
Oh, massively, yeah. And there's a maturity around how your organization and how all of the organizations you work with and the supply chain you have, how they understand your needs and how they understand how to make sure that data is managed in an effective way. So the policies you have and how you enforce them, those areas all I'd say are hot areas for future development, and more maturity in those would be really good to see.
And Nick, what would you like to see the vendors do, and what's the data culture you're looking to build?
First of all, I think even with the pandemic, we realized that we're talking about a new capital. It used to be the financial capital, it used to be the human capital. Now data is another capital around that. I think the situation with the pandemic brought also maturity on the one side and the need of analytics up to the top scale. In my case, I can tell you, when I came to this just before the pandemic, I had a very nice plan in the 18 months to move from descriptive to prescriptive. I had to do that in 2 months. Why? Because everyone came to me and say, I need to talk about trade risks, about multiple scenarios, and I had to do that fast. So back to your point, what I need to see from my partners around there is help me in this transformation. Secure on the one hand what I do have on my sensitive data, but on the other hand, to be able to provide me the elasticity and the scalability that I need in order to cover my business needs.
Ian, you've heard three very interesting stories there of what is expected of providers, but also what is going on inside organisations. What are you seeing in the organisations you work with, and what is Telstra Purple doing?
I'll answer that in two parts. Obviously, I think the security, and I mean, John and Nick have both alluded to data, right? Data is the new currency. Data, both in terms of actual data that you can use, data that you can touch, but more importantly, then analytics in terms of instrumentation for that data in order for you to look forward and build models. I think for me, it's a marriage between policy and platform. So what we're quite often seeing from a security perspective is there's not really a clarity in terms of message. There's not a clarity because the vendors are recognizing this is a place to play. And traditionally, where you had a network and a security provider and a platform provider, they would both offer you solutions that fit their particular steer. And the same thing is now happening with the cloud. So if you speak to a cloud provider, they will say that their model for security is perfectly okay. It works right. Zero trust architectures, understand your usage, understand your people, and apply the rules around it, and nothing will ever go wrong. If you go and talk to a telco, obviously Telstra, we provide networking, of course we do, or a firewall vendor, then they will talk SASE. So the cloud provider will talk about securing it within the cloud, and your network and your security provider will talk about securing the edge of the cloud. And I think the two need to get together. And that's certainly what we're doing within Telstra, is we're trying to actually build the Venn diagram, if you will, which actually shows where these two worlds collide. Because as customers, as users, as organizations that want to place their data within these platforms, you just need a clear message. You don't want to be doing that balancing act yourself.
At the very top of the discussion, I mentioned automation, and that's becoming is that becoming an important tool? Is it going to become more vital as we work into whatever the shape of our organisations will be in the future?
Yeah, I would agree. Automation with the current way of working, especially remotely now, our teams have lost the ability to print documents and paper client reports, questionnaires. There is no such concept now, and it has been for the last 12 months. So interestingly, much of this has now become digital, and it's created an opportunity for us to evaluate business processes and workflows that we have with perhaps a client onboarding process, and how can we automate much of that to reduce the number of man hours it takes to fulfill that process. And again, being a Microsoft house, we're looking at how to automate Power Apps, and we've begun to develop a few automation processes using a simple flow from a client onboarding questionnaire that's completed by, say, the front office, which then flows through to a document that's created in Word, which then subsequently goes to a fund manager for sign off, and then it lands up in the compliance inbox for execution. So that basic flow with the use of Power Automate or tools out there would very much streamline that process. And we have, without a doubt, taken this as an opportunity, and again, using the tool sets available to us. And I think, as I said, I touched on Teams earlier. Teams is very powerful. It's allowed us to create channels with the group of teams and create teams and project teams that allow them to work independently together with the use of Power Automate and Forms. So from my perspective, I think it's just the beginning. It's a journey, and it's about evaluating business processes, which is difficult remotely, but I'm sure it's going to develop beyond what we've delivered so far.
And Nick, I imagine you're in a sector where automation has huge opportunities. Is that something you're looking to do in the next months and years?
Absolutely. I remember when I was in British American Tobacco 1.5 years back, where automation was a strong pillar from our CEO, automate our business. When I came around here, we discussed also about automation. We forced to do automation in many areas. For example, think that when you have one of these big tankers in the dock, you need to be able to automate the document process because every day is more than $10,000. So it is a necessity to do that. Yes, we had quite a few partners working with us. To be honest, I'm surprised that now we have more partners and ideas than we can handle, but we're trying. In regards to technology, the technology is very mature now. In addition to the very nice solutions of the Blue Prism of the world, of the UiPath of the world, I truly believe now that the low-code and no-code solutions are helping us significantly on this one.
And John, is automation an opportunity for you?
Yeah, I mean, in all areas, both in the way we manage our services, in the services we provide to our clients and our partners and internal staff, automation is the key. I mean, one of the issues is it's a struggle to have to stop talking about things that the rest of your firm doesn't really care about, so and the things which they thought were already fixed, or things that they thought were already automated, or processes which are actually, I guess, firing off a bunch of manual tasks, and they're not as automated as you thought they were. So in all areas, that's a huge opportunity to massively simplify and make much more efficient the processes that we run through the organization. So, and that includes, some of the IT, I guess the IT tasks, which are things that we care about and have to care about, but actually they're there to enable some of the things which the firm needs to do. And so the conversation needs to be very contextual with how you talk to different parts of your organization around what you're trying to automate and why you're trying to do it and why it's so important.
Ian, there's clearly a high appetite for automation. Is that something you're coming across in your travels?
Everybody talks about it, right? And everybody sees a benefit in being able to take manual effort out of tasks, right? I mean, it totally makes sense, and it's just the same as anything. The more commoditized a process becomes, the easier it is to automate, and then you can shuffle it out of your direct flow, and it just happens in the background and everybody's comfortable with it. So yes, everybody, if I hear RPA once, I hear it 1,000 times. If I hear Blue Prism once, I hear it 1,000 times. I mean, my main feedback on that is always going to be cleanse first, or try to cleanse the process. Don't try to automate just for the sake of it. Just same with any of these things. If you lift and shift a process, it doesn't make it more efficient just because you put it through an automation engine. In fact, actually, it probably kicks out more errors. So my take on that, the same as with data and analytics, is simplify, cleanse it, build the engine on top of it. Otherwise, once you've automated it, it's stuck. And we all know with any enterprise, once it's running, to the point that John made, the people above just assume it's fine because it's done. And then when you actually go back to retrofit it and to cleanse it and really make it efficient, you struggle to get the budget to do so.
I think you want to be wary of the mess you can get yourself into by running vast numbers of automation processes which are mismanaged or not set up properly, because there is an assumption that all these things are equal and easy to set up, and on the marketing and on the surface they appear to be, but actually, again, you come back to the same problem of, well, what's it actually doing with our data, with our information? Where's that going, and how is it managing it? And as you start to run these things over a long period of time, then you can get yourself into a real sticky mess in terms of how all that information is being managed and how it needs to be managed over time. So,
if I may add as well, it's important with automation to ensure that you don't create shadow IT, because there's an element of no code based approaches available to us freely, and if you offer these to your staff, then to John's point, it can get slightly out of hand, especially with those outside of the business beginning to create their own processes with these free tools, which then ends up back in the IT. team to fix. So it's crucial that I think you've got to evaluate business processes first and see what fits best, and don't create the shadow IT, because we just don't want to go back there.
Which circles back to the three of you as business technology leaders, I suppose, to always have a culture of co-creation, so that you're using no code in collaboration with lines of business that need it.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, these tools are great, right? They are there to empower people to do things which, frankly, the IT team is not scaled to do. I've worked with a bunch of very smart people who are quite capable of doing these things if they were able to have the tools in their hands to be able to automate and manage some of these processes. And I think it's making sure those things are easy for them to access and they can do so in a safe way.
And you do all come from industries where that is the common, isn't it? Actually, everyone in your businesses are very deep thinking, clever people who could make huge amounts of change with technology and then end up creating lots of silos and issues.
Yes, we offer that as a capability. Always try to take a balance and have the relevant controls, because shadow IT is definitely an imminent risk around that. I fully agree on the value in regards to this. I remember when I started in my first attempt to put process mining tools in my organization, and although every one of us understood there's somewhere gold around there, especially in our processes, order to cash, procure to pay, we never managed as an organization to be able to leverage that. This was a lesson learned for me. Although we understand there is a need, we understand there is a value, we took one of the best tools in the market, but definitely the business value, the business case didn't end up.
I mean, the key conversation in my business is really about integration of information. So in simple terms, if you have some of your data in Azure and some of it in AWS and some of it's in Salesforce and some of it's somewhere else, it's really difficult to make sense of how you get a single view, a single clear golden source of truth, as is often expressed. So that becomes a challenge. It's not impossible, but it just makes life hard. And I think you have to be wary of, I guess, when you're looking at what your cloud strategy is making sure you're clear on what the purpose of it is and how you will deal with that problem, because it's integration of applications at a new, grander and far more terrifying level if you get it wrong, because you can end up with all your data everywhere, which is exactly what you don't want.
And if I continue your thinking, because we tried to solve that by having, the good old data lake or lake warehouses have done it, and believe me, we spent enormous amount of effort and money around that. We put everything somewhere, all in one place, but the value to derive from that was questionable. So,
yeah, I've heard that story many times. Yeah.
And just one final question, if I may, is in this move to the cloud, how will you, as businesses and business technology leaders, keep pace with the amount of change expected?
I think it's about going at the pace that suits your business, not the pace that the industry is trying to drive you at. And I think it is clearly recognised that once you are in the cloud, the rate of change is ginormous, right? But I don't necessarily think that suits everybody. I think it's about recognising what you want to be famous for within your business. It's about getting that right, making yourself look good, getting that into the cloud, benefiting from everything that gives you, and then following up with the rest. I think too many enterprises try to boil the ocean, excuse the phrase, try to do too much and actually end up doing very little. So basically get what you want to be famous for into the cloud, get all the benefits that it will offer you, but do not be driven by the hype, be driven by your business.
I mean, clearly we're in a race, right? You have to keep up with this stuff and try and find ways to utilize it and do it within your organization in a controlled way. And I think that is I'll make no I guess no excuses for it. That is a challenge. It's going to be difficult to try and keep up with this pace of change. But I think it is. It all comes with the understanding that change is something that we see everywhere happening in a way which has not happened before in this industry or in any industry. So it's understanding that is, if anything, that is the new normal. It's just being able to keep up with the changes and the opportunities that come from this. And if you see it that way, then there are enormous advantages for the picking if you can grab hold of them and use them in a way which doesn't, I guess, deviate your purpose. You end up spending a lot of time doing things which seem of no value because you haven't started out with the right structure, the right intent.
First of all, I couldn't agree more with Ian and John. Couldn't agree more. We have proved the past year that we can use cloud as an enabler for our survival, I would say. Now, my key theme is focus on strategic priorities. What we should do, identify the strategic priorities and then try to leverage from the cloud technology the elements along with your partner that can help this strategic priority. It is not easy because now these terms are also in the mouth of the executive team and they have a tendency now to talk around that. But I think 2021, at least for us, it will be the year that we will start normalize things and get it up to a little bit better pace.
Yeah, to some degree, it was such a fast-paced program last year that I agree with the comments that it's going to be slightly slowed down this year to reevaluate the key objectives. And I think from my perspective, now that we have adopted technology for the end users that allow them to work effectively from home, we've begun our journey into the cloud from the infrastructure perspective. It's very much continuing the infrastructure migration at a pace that allows us to ensure and evaluate each service based on how it should fit within the cloud model, rather than just lift and shifting or reevaluating other opportunities, looking at platform as services or software services, and actually looking at those as an opportunity. Whereas I think last year was very much fast paced to get yourself into the cloud. It's now an opportunity to reevaluate a service that you put in the cloud to actually say, actually, based on the cost model that I now see in the cloud, I may want to reevaluate how I foresee this for the long-term strategy. One other thing I would say is I'm also going to look at 2021 as an opportunity to review and keep a close eye on business resiliency. I think most of us forget that moving to the cloud is very much providing the reliance on a third-party cloud provider. But business resiliency as a whole for our organizations, as we've tested during 2020, is without a doubt going to be a key priority going into 2021. And ensuring your business resiliency is as high and secure and reliant in the cloud. So building your failover data centers and also just keep a close eye on the SLAs that have been set by the cloud vendor, because I think it's fair to say that they're not always going to be highly reliable or provide us 100% uptime. So just keep a close eye on that, and that's something that we're going to keep a close eye on during 2021.
Brilliant. Mattisai Al-Haq, Ian Sheen, John O'Donovan, Nick Ganakis, thank you so much for a fantastic debate. Really interesting insight to kick off today's The Studio at Home.